Hi, welcome to my channel, Nugget of Wisdom. It's been a little bit of time since I've put some videos up, and really I've just been thinking over the last few weeks about the next topic, which, as you'll see from the video, is called "The Truth Will Set Us Free." And obviously the stuff that's going on out there in the world at the moment, most people would say either I'm not interested because it's all crazy, or it's all crazy. The incredible events, incredible is not the right word, the terrible events, the crazy events, the mad events that are occurring, where we see a kind of a complete breakdown in what we would traditionally view as morals. Where the people that we think we trust to be the custodians of democracy are basically as ruthless as the people they claim to be moralizing against. So the terrorist is on both sides. He's on the terrorist side and he's on the democratic side. Murder, killing, lies. I mean, I was going to provide you a lot of evidence about how most of what we're hearing in the media, the mainstream media, is selections of the truth, fabrications, twisting, propaganda. But I don't really need to, because all you've got to do is go on the net and seek out an article from an independent journalist, or an article from somebody who's just taken a photograph or a video of an event, and then compare that what's coming out in the media, and compare that in what's coming out from politicians' mouths. To most people, it's probably quite astonishing, and it's quite destabilizing, because also the narrative is that, oh my gosh, the world is going crazy. It's terrible. It's awful. Human beings are evil. You can't trust politicians. What are we going to do? World War III. But in reality, unfortunately, that's part of the propaganda narrative that's also going on. Because in reality, the world is going through an incredible transformation. Just like when the first printing presses got to a point where ordinary people in the street could get their hands on a book, and they could read the book and decide for themselves what they thought about something, and they could learn. The internet is transforming the world. The ability for us to communicate, like I'm doing now, with people thousands of miles away, to get information, knowledge, to listen to directly to somebody speak, rather than hear second or third hand an opinion about that person. To not be tied to a small number of media channels. And media channels that really have been, and we all know this, have been sort of, they're sensationalist, they have distraction techniques to get us to look at something and then buy a product that's advertised. They're propagandist because somebody has bought into them so that they can get what they want out of the system, and they use them to try and get us to basically rubberneck and believe in things. But that whole system is breaking down. And people say, oh, our political system is broken. Nothing is broken. The horse and cart wasn't broken when the combustion engine came in. When the guy was driving past the horse and cart, he didn't say the horse and cart was broken, we had to change it to a car. No, the horse and cart worked, but it was no longer suitable because something else came. And then no matter what anybody did, the horse and cart disappeared. No matter how much we loved the horses and the carts and riding around, they just disappeared because this other thing just took over. And in reality, that's what's happening to us today with media. And there's a lag, because the people who have lived in the old system, and you can argue whether the old system worked or didn't work, we're still here. We have lived in a relatively peaceful world for a few decades. So you could argue that it, like the horse and cart, that did what it was supposed to do. But now, it's completely and utterly no use anymore. Because because the people who buy into that system and who control it don't realize how quickly the masses out there are able to get to information. And they're still using the old system to basically project their view of the world and events and morals. And so it's incredibly easy. It's so easy to discover that the people you really thought you trusted are absolutely telling you packs of lies and misinformation. Lies they may have heard and they believe. Lies they've convinced themselves to believe. It doesn't matter. And so it's an amazing time, because we're going like the caterpillar transforming into the butterfly. It's potentially a very dangerous time. It's potentially a very scary time, but it's also potentially a fantastic time. And that's why when I say the truth will set you free, fundamentally, information and truth is at the core of how we're going to get ourselves transformed into something better. That's really the core of what where we want to be. So I want to just give you a short summary, because I like to apply my view of the world to what's really going on today. I want to give you a short summary of what I think is going on with the war, the troubles in Gaza, the Israeli attack on the Gazan people, the mass killings of people, the genocide, the pager attacks, the conflict with Iran, Russia and Ukraine. I'm not going to go into detail, because loads of people in the internet will go into detail. I will tell you about what soldiers are fighting where, who's wrong and who's right. Some of the best independent media channels will tell you so many truths about what's really going on, where they're getting information from people on the ground. But they're also quite moralistic. And they also, some of them have a real axe to grind against the conventional system. They feel like they're being lied to, and when they get out there and say, no, this is the truth. But I really just want to tell you really simply what's going on. Now, why should you believe me? Well, you shouldn't. But I would say to you, just go out and get confirmation about what I'm going to say, and you'll find it pretty easily. I'll put some links in my videos as well to people, professors and economists and ex-military colonels and generals, highly respected people, some of them in the US Air Force, in the military, people who have been in that system, that political, military, civil service kind of system, Washington, the White House, the Pentagon, all that stuff, and who will tell you exactly what's going on. So I don't have any interest in watching legacy media, because I don't trust them. And a lot of the time when I look at legacy media, I realize they're telling fibs, or they're completely biased to one side. I'm not interested in reading propaganda media. I'm not interested in, they banned RT in the US. I don't care about RT. It's a Russian channel, and it's possible that Russian channel is going to be projecting a load of propaganda from there. I don't know, but I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in is hearing from people who have got real credibility, have been in the military, have been in the economic decision-making process, the diplomatic services, politics, retired from politics, ambassadors. There's loads of them. And pretty much most of them I have listened to are Americans. I've checked their backgrounds to see if they were criminals or murderers or thieves. Most of them are highly respected people, highly intelligent people. And I've also listened to a few Europeans. And so what is my conclusion? Well, by the way, I need to also say to you that I spent 8 years in politics. And what was really interesting for me was that because I was in politics, I learned so much about the system from the inside. And I was in regional politics. But I see so much of what's going on at the top level in the system I was in, where the public think one thing, but actually what's going on is completely different. Sometimes I call it a shamocracy. And when I was in politics, I really got to the point where I realized it was just not what everybody thought it was. It was completely different. And so I called it a shamocracy, where basically I was trying to express that the democratic values that we hold about how a system works were not really relevant with inside a system. Just like when you see the sort of the man behind the curtain idea, the Wizard of Oz, and it's a guy just behind a curtain pulling all the levers, and everybody up until that point, thinks it's something mystical and amazing and powerful, but it isn't. And the power is within the characters in the movie, the Tin Man and the Lion and so on, and the Scarecrow. It's within them that the power is, not the guy behind that curtain. And that's very much how the political system, I believe, in the UK works, and the US. And I can see it. And you may not see it, but I know you're suspicious of it. And I know you're beginning to feel it. And I know that at some stage, you're going to absolutely have it validated for you, because it's almost like a dam bursting. The amount of truths that are coming out on the internet now, the amount of opportunity for people to take photographs of an event as it's happening and see it, and the sort of the comparison between what you're hearing on legacy media is becoming wider and wider. And also, older people are still looking at legacy media. But as the population ages and we get older and older, more and more people are not touching the conventional terrestrial televisions, and the newspapers. They're reading stuff off their smartphones, and they're listening to podcasts and so on. So I want to get to that place where I tell you what I really think is going on, and with reference to the Gaza and the Russian conflict. They're highly linked, because fundamentally what you have in our society, and I would say what we call our Western democracies, is quite similar. It's quite similar. The mechanisms of the British system and the American system, they may look different, with your sort of your parliament building and your called MPs and your governors and senators, but the mechanisms of power behind that, the guys behind the curtain, are doing very similar sorts of pulling similar sorts of levers that you can see, and most of the people who are analysing this at the moment are just analysing what I call the puppets. They're analysing the people outside that system, and thinking somehow they run things. Also, sometimes their egos get the better of them, and they go, "Oh, look how stupid Biden is, and Camilla Harris doesn't know what she's doing, and it's what did Trump just say," and all this sort of stuff. When in fact, those people actually are not that relevant. They have a relevance, they have their place, but they're not at the core. If you want to solve a problem, they're not at the core of the machine, for want of a better word. And so you have this situation as well, where when we analyse politics in the media and in independent media, the brilliant, brave people in independent media, they use the language of propaganda. They don't even know they're doing it. So they'll say America is an imperialist. Well, look at Israel has done to these people and mass murdered all these people. The Iranians will rise up. UK imperialism. In reality, the world is not like that anymore. There are probably more people in America supporting the Palestinians and the Gazans than there are Gazans. There are people in the streets of America campaigning to stop the wars, to put an end to the stuff that's going on. I live in the UK. When I walk down the street, all I see is a multicolored, diverse country full of peaceful people who have no real say, really have no real say in the political system. They think they have. Oh, but we can vote, but they got two choices, really. And then the parties are so manipulated behind the curtain that there is no choice. It looks like a choice, but there isn't a choice. Look at the US. I mean, seriously? You could have, I don't know, maybe 10,000 candidates in the US who are absolutely fantastic people. But you have just two. And whatever you think about those two candidates, do you think the US could do better than that? Even from the point of view just saying they may be great, but let's have a bigger pool of selection. Let's have more candidates, have more choice. And that's because those candidates really don't matter that much. And the difference between the two parties doesn't matter that much. Because that's not where it's happening. That's not where the decisions are being made that have a large influence on our lives in the future. Can I also say to you that the reason why I want to talk about this is that we're in such a fantastic transformative time, but it's one of the most dangerous times probably in my lifetime, because things can get out of control and go wrong. And I genuinely believe that no country, the US, Russia, China, any of these countries, want to start nuclear war. None of them. But it may be out of their control. And I'll explain why in a few minutes. And that's the bit that's troublesome. That's where you have to say, okay, hold on. What do we need to do here? We need to find out what's really going on. We need to know the truth. We need to figure out what we can then do to solve the problem. I was a product designer for many years, and politics never solved a problem. We didn't get into politics when we were trying to fix a design problem. We actually looked at all the evidence, and then we figured out what was going on, and we did something. We changed the screws, or we modified something, and we did tests to see if it would work or not. Sometimes it didn't work, then we'd do some more work. So from that point of view, you can't really get to a point where you're going to solve the challenges of the modern world with the political system that we have, or even focusing on those people that you think are in charge when they're not. So I'll just move on a little bit from here and just explain. There's several kinds of groups of people within society, and I kind of just tag them, just give them a name, One I call the silent majority. And the silent majority to me are all of the people, probably, 60, 70% or more of people, probably more than that, who are totally peaceful. They're not interested in politics. They don't want to change the world. They just want to live their lives. They want to be able to have their children, their hobbies, just go to work, come home from work, do their thing. And they're the types of people that if they saw somebody on the street who was wounded or hurt, they'd be jumping out to help them. Those people are the most powerful people in society, and they don't realize it. And their power has increased several times fold, because in the past, the mechanisms they could use to get their voices heard were very, very, very narrow, very controlled. They were very short, small, narrow routes for somebody in the vocal majority, in the silent majority, to be able to get their voices heard. Then you have the vocal minority. And the vocal minority are people often who've just had enough. They're angry, they're frustrated, sorry about that. They're angry and they're frustrated. Sorry about that. They're angry and frustrated, and they want to do something. Often they are manipulated and fed by what I call the silent minority, the shamocrats. And that silent minority are a very small number of people. I reckon in the US, it's probably less than 50 people who are networked through the Pentagon, Washington, business, military companies, the corporate sector. These people tend to be very rich, and they, over decades, they and their relatives and their parents and grandparents and whatever, their network, have manipulated what was probably a basic democracy in the US at some stage into a shamocracy. And they've used all sorts of very devious, smart, very intelligent, but very unwise techniques to do it. And with all these conflicts in the world, that silent minority, you don't even know who they are most of the time. They don't come out. They use other people to be the voice. Biden and Trump, all these people. And when things go wrong and these people, these shamocrats, is what I call them, make mistakes, they then configure things to blame one of these puppets. And so you don't see them, but they're there. And when I was in politics, I knew who they were. And nobody would have guessed that you could just point into a room and see some very boring, middle-aged, fat guy who was basically absolutely not really engaging with anybody, but was sitting there controlling everything and making decisions about who was going to be the politician, who was in charge, what decisions would be made on huge money deals. And that's what's happening in the US. And I'm not saying that's not happening in China or Russia. I don't know. My guess is it probably is happening there too. But the big problem with the US is that the US is what we call a monopolar power. So the US has been in charge in the world since around the Second World War. Before that it was England. It was England, UK, Britain. Before that it was the Dutch. So America's been the top dog. And America has used incredible techniques of propaganda through media, movies, all sorts of stuff, newspapers, films, to basically from the cradle, from birth, to basically program us all into a whole narrative about the world. Because as a monopolar power, they were not in a position to go around and just take over countries. That's happened in the past. So they did it by different means. And America has hundreds of bases around the world and is very, very, very focused on the things that it really needs to maintain itself as the number one. So that's the silent minority. I will tell you from my experience of politics as well, is that the silent majority, the U's and I's, that ordinary people, the Joes, what have you called them, ordinary Joes, they know that we potentially hold all of the power. And so what they do is they trick us into giving it all away. Or they make mechanisms, build mechanisms, to take it all away from us that we don't even see. The two-party system. I mean, you can see it in the US. The people of the US must be starting to think, what's going on here? This is supposed to be democracy. How come there's no real debate about all these billions of dollars going off to these wars? Why are they going off to these wars? What about our own country? What about our healthcare system and all that sort of stuff? So you start to see that, but also I would say to you that the shamocrats really, really care about the silent majority. The silent majority is what they really, really worry about. It's like a seesaw. If they can control the silent majority, then they can do as the silent minority what they want to do. If they start losing control, they're in trouble. And they're losing control. So the shamocrats in the US are losing control because the internet's opening a whole process of communication and knowledge and information about what's going on. And they can't control the narrative anymore. And because they can't control it, and because they're not willing to change, this is the way they've always done things. And they don't want to let go because they'll have to let go of their power. They're coming out and being seen for what they truly are. And you can argue they're evil, they're not evil, but they're no better than any of the people that they try to brainwash into believing are the bad ones. They're just as complicit in terrorism, murders and kidnappings and all that sort of stuff. And killings. They're ruthless. And in fact, my experience from politics is not only ruthless, but they have no empathy at all. In many cases, you could call them covert narcissists. They're very friendly. They come across very kind and very nice, but they're ruthless people who basically do not care whatsoever about the things they do because they say, we have to do these to get the outcome. It's all about the outcome. And so today in the world, you've got Ukraine and you've got Israel. They're proxies of the US. What do I mean by proxies? Basically, the US is a nuclear power. And the US can't go out and just bomb or attack a country that has nuclear weapons, because you're going to have nuclear war. The US doesn't want nuclear war. These people don't want nuclear war. They want to be the number one and control the world. And they want to do it through whatever means they can. And so what they do is they use proxies. So what they do is they go to a country and they start interfering in that country. They start manipulating things. They bring in NGOs, the CIA, set up these clandestine campaigns. And then eventually what they do is they can oust governments. Some cases, government, God knows what happens, leaders in some cases, but there's lots of cases, questionable cases about people being killed and assassinated. But basically they try to take control of that country through the back door. And then they have their own people in there who take all the political positions. So for example, Netanyahu, he looks like an Israeli guy, but actually he's also an American. And he grew up in America and he went to school and he went to university and he got a job through the US government process. So they have their own people in these countries. And then you'll say, well, why are they doing this? Well, it's obvious why they're doing it. They want to stay the number one in the world. It's not about religion. It's not about the Jewish population. It's not about any of that. It's not about protecting the world or saving the world or trying to get rid of bad people and terrorists. None of that. It's all about maintaining the position as the number one power. And of course, if you look at the Middle East or West Asia, you have got incredibly critical oil countries that are producing oil, drilling for oil, producing it, and the trade routes where that oil goes, the ships that have to go through the Suez Canal. You got gas, and you got other trade routes, the trade route for goods to travel from one country to the other. So Israel is a giant land base for the US. It's made up. And America sees Iran as a major threat to its control in the Middle East. Because Iran doesn't play ball with the US. You don't have to love or hate Iran, it doesn't matter. I'm not saying Iran's a good country or bad country. But Iran will not play ball with the US. So if you're not with us, you're against us. You're either in or you're out, and Iran is out. The US doesn't want to see Israel expand. But Israel is, Netanyahu is like, he's like a teenager. Yes, they're the parents. The shamocracy in the US are the parents. But Netanyahu is kind of a troublesome teenager who's running wild. And not only is he running wild because of the atrocities that were committed, which is obviously really hurt and made people feel like lashing out, the atrocities that happened when they had the invasion of Hamas into their country. But also, they have a strong identity that comes out of all sorts of troubles with the Holocaust and so on. And they want their own state and they want their own people and they want to feel safe. And they're surrounded by people that they don't feel safe around. The problem is that the US is not really, as like a parent, it's not really controlling its child very well. It has the ability to stop all of the stuff from going on there. All the wars, all the horrendous atrocities, they could stop with one phone call. Stop it. Just Biden ring Netanyahu, it's over. But the problem for the US is it's got an election coming. And so they're so focused on short term and the election and how close it is, that by reining Netanyahu in, or by saying to, Zelensky, let's make a peace deal with the Russians because you're just not going to win, they worry about losing the race to Trump. And all sorts of attempts have been made to try and stop Trump. Because Trump's a wild card. Trump's not easy to manipulate because he has his own money. Whatever you think about Trump and some of the crazy things he says, he's not really controllable like the Democrat people, like Harris. Same scenario with Ukraine. You know, there's so much evidence out there, and it's really difficult to say it, but there is so much evidence out there to show that really the Russians going into Ukraine obviously is wrong, but that the US poked the Russian bear in the eye through its proxy in Ukraine. And that a peace deal could have been reached, the one that was allegedly stopped by Boris Johnson, but again, Boris was a puppet. And then this absolute, ambition by the US to basically wear down Russia, destroy it with sanctions, deplete it through war and everything else. Because again, it's a threat. Russia is a threat. Big oil producer, big gas producer. Starting to have, relations with other countries like China and BRICS and all this sort of stuff. And so basically, that's the reason why you're seeing these conflicts. I'm not saying that there isn't other different levels of conflict, religious conflicts and land conflicts and all sorts of stuff. But fundamentally, if you want to get to the source of the problems that we're seeing now and the potential threat of nuclear war, it's all back to a small number of people who most people don't know, who are controlling things in the US. These people also they're not particularly wise, intellectually smart, but they're not really good at organizing things the way they could. They're not thinking about the safety of humanity or the safety of mankind or trying to stop nuclear wars. They're probably quite blasé about it. And they are likely to inadvertently cause a chain of events which could lead to nuclear war. And that's actually really easy. Because, if Iran or any of these countries end up getting bombed severely and they bomb back and then there's a whole over and back, then chances are you'll end up with a regional war. And the regional war will pull in Russia. So then you have a nuclear country with Iran as a proxy. You've got US with Israel as a proxy. And it doesn't take much for one mistake to be made. And then you've got whatever it is. We've got an hour left. We won't even be able to think very much about the consequences because we'll all be dead. And if we survive, well, it's not a very nice life. So there's an amazing challenge for us, the silent majority. We are the most powerful. The Shamocrats really fear us. And we can do all sorts of things. We can come out. We can wake up, come out and say, no. No to war. No one wins a war. It's rubbish. It's crazy. You cannot win a war. You can only end up with less losses than the other person. And no matter what you do, well, I get the arms race. I'll get more arms than them. Well, eventually they find out you've got this technology. They get it. So you're just raising the bar all the time to more and more and more dangerous weapons. The only people that lose in a war is everybody loses in a war. We lose our dignity. We lose our humanity. We lose hundreds of thousands, millions of people who, just like us, have a right to live and exist, and people mostly who have nothing to do with this stuff. Who has the right to take somebody else's life in some sort of pretend game? Who has that right? I don't have that right. The very fact I'm alive is a privilege, and I'm lucky. I'm fortunate. The idea that people can mindlessly take the lives of others and do it in such cruel ways should be totally unacceptable to us, the silent majority. So what can we do? Easy. Find out where there's a campaign, a street campaign. Get up with a sign which says, I want peace, and march in it. Second of all, write to the Minister for Defence or Secretary of State, whoever it is in your country, saying, I want you now to please, and your government, to send messages to all these people to say, we're not going to give you anything anymore. Because remember, it's all fine saying, oh, we want peace and everything else. But the UK and the US and some European countries are feeding the weapons to these countries. You say, no, we're stopping it now. We're just stopping. Hold on, let's stop. Then we want you to actually have discussions with your enemies. To sit down respectfully and talk to them. The other thing you can do, like I've done, is I open my Facebook to the public. I mean, Facebook is a rubbish thing, really. People putting on their pictures of their cats and look at the new car I bought and I'm off on holiday. Forget all that stuff. Open your Facebook to the public and start putting on your truths. And you don't have to have a video like me. Just basically link all the amazing podcasts from intelligent and wise people that you think make some sense to you and your values. Put it on Facebook. We want Facebook to be full of millions of independent media channels and podcasts and fantastically wise people. So they can basically help us to change, to elevate, to grow in knowledge and in wisdom. Sign petitions. I just signed a petition saying I wanted the US to be expelled from the UN. United Nations. Well, can you imagine if there was 1 million signatures or 2 million signatures? What would they do? So there's lots of things. Tell your friends. Talk to your friends. Don't just sit there and go, oh, I don't want to talk about politics because it's too terrible for me. No, we're in a fantastic time, an amazing, positive time. And we're giving this amazing opportunity to wake up and to transform ourselves into what we truly are. We are beings of love. We're not beings of fear. Fear is what's driving an awful lot of the mad stuff that's going on in the world. But it's not our true nature. Our true nature is we're actually loving beings. We're incredible beings, amazing beings. Be proud of ourselves for what we really are and express that. So there's loads we can do. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to select some questions and go into a little bit more detail about what I've just been talking about and how we could make some changes to get to a much more positive outcome. So thank you very much for your time and I'll see you again for my next video.